Thank you so much, Josh. Good morning, everyone, and thanks once again to the Seed AI team for pivoting and putting together such an important event. My name is Julia Wynn. I'm Senior Director of State Government Affairs at code.org. I manage our federal policy work as well as our state policy work in kind of the Mid-East region, so Midwest, Wisconsin down through North Carolina. And I'll turn it over to Krista to introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you, Julia, and thank you, Seed, for hosting us today. I am Krista D'Amelio, Director of State Government Affairs at code.org. I handled the New England territory and the Northeast. I am in the DC area. I'm actually in DC, and I saw a comment earlier that wished us luck if schools were open and daycares were open, if your streets were plowed. Everything's on a delay, so if you hear a little voice in the background, it's my daughter. And if you hear loud noises, it's the plows finally coming through in this area. So again, thank you all, and we're excited to dive right into trends in statewide state education agency initiatives on AI education. Julia?
Thanks, Krista. So for those who aren't familiar with code.org, we are a national nonprofit focused on making sure every student in every state has access to computer science and AI education. I think many of us, many people know us for our policy recommendations. We also have a variety of resources on AI education and AI in education, and we also have free computer science curriculum.
Yeah, and so to understand trends, let's start with understanding why state education agency coordination matters for statewide education efforts. And to start, let's clarify the roles. So when it comes to AI in education, states and districts have different but complementary responsibilities. At the state level, the SEA sets the what and supports the how. So that means establishing clear expectations for AI learning and responsible use, providing guidance, and setting guardrails around privacy, security, access, and academic integrity. And this is important because it creates statewide coherence so districts aren't left guessing. Districts then can implement locally. So they create district AI policies, they can choose tools and vendors that align with the state guardrails, and then integrate AI into curriculum and instruction in ways that make sense for their students and communities. But coordination is what makes this work. States provide the clarity and consistency, and districts provide the real world feedback that helps improve guidance over time. So districts consistently look to the state to understand what's allowed, what's expected, and where the boundaries are. And the takeaway with this is simple. Without strong SEA coordination, AI implementation becomes fragmented and risky. So with it, states can support safe, equitable, and scalable AI use across all schools.
So the first trend that we wanted to share with you all is AI standards. So this is essentially state education agencies revising. Let me unmute myself. To include AI or creating perhaps separate AI standards in some cases. Oh, and this is really prompted by the question, what do students need to know to be AI literate, AI fluent, and AI proficient? And then how do we scaffold that across K-12? And what does that content actually look like? And what we're seeing, I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of the content because I know we have some great presenters in the AI literacy section tomorrow. But just in a general sense, we usually see this start with basic computational thinking in the early elementary grades, a recognition that AI, is not human, and then moving on to designing and shaping AI in the high school grades. And most often we're seeing this incorporated into computer science standards because computer science is really a great home for AI. AI is built on computer science concepts. So if you want to understand, what goes on under the hood, for lack of a better term, with AI, you need to understand data and algorithms and responsible computing, and all of that is computer science. We are seeing states also incorporate AI into some CTE standards. So states like Idaho, Kentucky, California, and Nevada have done this. Also digital literacy standards, technology standards, library media standards, or data science standards. And then at least one state we know of, Iowa, is actually considering standalone AI standards that can then be incorporated into other subject areas. And so what coordination looks like in this space, essentially, there is, as many of you know, national CSTA standards. I believe we have some CSTA people in this conference today. So many states reference those before they start work on their own standards. Then, of course, every state standards review process has a committee of local educators that help inform what those standards look like. Then the next step is for it to go out for public comment. So there's further input from teachers and others on the ground that will be implementing these standards. And then finally, the local SCAs are actually the ones that are doing the work to implement the curriculum on this. So this is a state map of all the states that have either already integrated AI into computer science standards, are in the process, or are likely to do so this year. And let me just call out South Carolina because that you can see it's a different color. That's because they have K-8 AI standards, but not 9-12.
Awesome. And so the second big trend that we're seeing is state level AI guidance. And when we say state AI education guidance, we're talking about something that's typically issued by the SEA. It is a set of statewide recommendations and resources that help schools use AI responsibly and effectively. And this kind of guidance matters because it gives districts a consistent baseline, so schools aren't left navigating AI on their own. So most state AI guidance includes a few common elements. The first is it clarifies purpose and principles, so what AI should and shouldn't be used for in schools. Second, it sets responsible use expectations for both educators and students. And this includes what is appropriate classroom use looks like. And the third is it addresses student data and privacy and security, including how sensitive information should be handled when AI tools are involved. And so you'll see guidance around academic integrity and assessment, how AI use is permitted, when it needs to be disclosed, and how schools should think about grading in an AI-enabled world. And finally, strong guidance includes support for AI literacy and educator capacity building, along with procurement considerations so districts know how to vet AI tools safely. And the thing to remember is this kind of guidance doesn't slow innovation. It actually enables it by giving schools clarity, guardrails, and shared expectations. Julia, next slide, if you don't mind. And so there's another important distinguish that we're seeing states wrestle with when we're talking about AI guidance. And it's this guidance versus policy. And the reality is most states need both. But guidance is flexible and non-binding. It focuses on principles and promising practices, and it's easy to update as AI tools and classroom use evolve, which we all know with AI, it's ever evolving. And so guidance is especially helpful early on because it supports districts as they design local approaches without locking anyone into rules that might age quickly. Policy, on the other hand, is more formal and it's long lasting. It goes through an approval process, it changes more slowly, and it defines clear requirements and accountability. So in other words, it's what must happen. And what we're seeing in practice is some states are moving towards policy to ensure consistency and baseline protections. And two states that this is true in currently are Ohio and Tennessee. They are already requiring districts or schools to adopt formal AI policies. And that reflects a shift from optional guardrails to required ones. But all in all, AI guidance gives states and districts a balanced way to move quickly, to move safely, and to move sustainably when implementing AI use and AI learning. Julia, next slide if you don't mind. And so how does this coordination happen? Well, what does it actually look like in practice? Once a state publishes AI guidance, when an SEA puts out guidance, districts actively use it. Most commonly, districts use state guidance as a starting point to draft or update their own local AI policies. And then they start to tailor those policies to their community, grade levels, and local expectations. Districts also take state level guardrails and translate them into everyday procedures. Things like staff and student use expectations, classroom norms, training plans, and communications to families. And another big area, as mentioned before, is procurement. Districts often align their tool selection and approval processes with state expectations by developing clear local evaluation criteria. But most importantly, this isn't one directional. Districts create a feedback loop. Their real world implementation lessons help inform updates for state guidance. So ultimately, strong state guidance doesn't limit control, doesn't limit local control. It actually makes local implementation clearer, safer, and more consistent across districts. Julia, last slide. And so here you can see there are 34 states that have AI guidance in education. And if you're interested in taking a deeper look at specific guidance examples, I directly work with the states of Maine, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and they have guidance that actually clarifies computer science as fundamental to AI. And they are 3 of 17 states that have done this. So I would recommend looking at their guidance just because I do work directly with those states. But there are other 17 states that have implemented similar guidance that clarifies computer science as fundamental to AI.
And the final trend we wanted to highlight for everyone today is stakeholder working groups. So the advent, the publicization of AI into the broader education sphere has really meant like larger K-12 system change. And so that means that a lot of SEAs and schools have to rethink policies and how instruction is delivered. And inherently, there are a lot of stakeholders impacted. So there's really a need for kind of a flexible, collaborative structure. And there's also kind of a sense no one representative has all the answers, right? We need to include everyone in this conversation as we're doing today here at the national scale. So that has preempted a few different types of these kind of flexible stakeholder working groups. What we've seen in states is many are adopting AI in education task forces. So these are a couple of the states that have a more formal task force specific to AI education. These task forces are defined by more kind of specific objectives, like creating a set of recommendations or things of that nature. And then there are also states that have just general AI task forces, so not specific to education. And these are a listing of all the states we're aware of with those. There are also a few states that have legislative AI task forces just made up of legislators. These are 3 of the states that have done kind of broader statewide roundtables or collaboratives. North Carolina has convened a lot of teachers for frequent collaboratives across the states to share best practices on AI. Ohio has an AI in education coalition made up of industry and education folks. They have informed the state's guidance on AI. And then there's also, I think Amanda mentioned in the chat, there are some AI coordinator positions in state education agencies. We're aware of about 25 states with dedicated AI staff that are meeting together as a group every few months or so to kind of share best practices as well. So again, how coordination happens in this space. In general, the state kind of has a role to play in convening these groups, and then the membership, whether they're from industry or education or the nonprofit space, really drive the outcomes in dialogue. So just to conclude, I think, what we're seeing in terms of biggest trends in the state education agencies are the one that are really clearing the path and kind of framing that path and creating a space for the local education agencies to innovate and kind of make more specific decisions and create more specific guardrails on AI.
Yeah, and moving forward further, what can stakeholders and partners actually do? Well, first, at code.org, we believe support state leadership and local implementation. That means helping SEAs define clear benchmarks for AI education, co-developing practical infrastructure like guidance and tools, and sharing best practices in the field, including what's working, what's not, and what is the data telling us. The second, and this is critical, ground AI education in computer science. Computer science at code.org, we believe, is the foundation for meaningful AI understanding because AI depends on computer science. It doesn't replace it. So education policy must evolve along computer science metrics. And if we want students to truly understand AI, not just use it, we have to invest in computer science teacher capacity and intentionally integrate AI concepts into existing computer science pathways. So the bottom line is strong. AI education happens when stakeholders reinforce state leadership and strengthen computer science as the backbone.
Thank you.